And hello. Hi. I am very glad to be here. Thank you all for showing up to listen to me. I'm very humbled. I'm Helin, and today I'll talk about how we use domain-driven design in practice in our projects. So this is me, and I am a tech lead in TransferWise. I have been mostly back-end engineer for a long time, 2.5 years in TransferWise, and then switched to this role 3 months ago or something like that. So I am leading a team called SMB Product. What we are working on is trying to make TransferWise a better product for small and medium businesses. And I'll give you probably too much context about TransferWise in this talk because I have some examples that are specifically about our projects. So I would like to give you an introduction on what TransferWise is. We are a fintech based in many different countries, but I usually am in London. And we are trying to make money move without borders. And it is a heavily regulated sector, and that's why we are working closer with so many different experts. But if you're an expat or if you're living in a country that you haven't born in, if you're an immigrant, it is very hard to open up a bank account or get your money into that country. That's why I really like Francesco's talk. It was just before me. We are very much a mission-driven company. And our goal is to make money move as fast as possible, as transparent as possible, and everywhere without borders. So, after this introduction, I have constructed this talk in 3 big chunks. First part is know your domain, to understand what you need to build. Because as engineers, and I'm an engineer, and this is going to be a talk coming from engineers, we need to understand what we are building to be able to build it successfully. And second part, I'll talk a bit about the implementation patterns and some examples that we used in our production systems that is working today. And the last part is about cross-domain and cross-team collaboration. Because throughout this talk, you will probably notice that bounded contexts, which is hopefully mean more to you in the end of this talk, and the team boundaries are very important to be able to deliver independently. So if you emphasize the team boundaries so much, you might end up in a state that teams are working alone. Cross-team collaboration and reminding yourself that company is something that works holistically is very important, just not to trap yourself in your team. First part, know your domain. We would call ourselves product engineers. I don't know in here, but in London, it is a very much overloaded term. So what does product engineering actually means is we are trying to understand what customer needs and how can we assess the customer value. And to be able to do that, we also need some tools to be able to assess that customer value and to be able to deliver for the customer. And product engineering as a perspective and a practice, to me, is building a customer conviction so that you would understand them, build your feature for them. I want to talk a bit about our structure. I am in SMB team, which is an independent autonomous team, which is in a bigger tribe. It has multiple other teams and multiple supporting units that doesn't really do exactly the same thing with the product teams. For example, we have legal team, we have business development and customer support that are in our tribe, but they're not exactly the same units of my team. My team is a product team that is working in product building. This is very important because a team alone cannot always have all the resources. So some resources is shared in tribe. For example, compliance people. For example, lawyers in the business area are usually shared in the tribe. All of this is to make sure that you have autonomous and independent teams, because let's be fair, like no one is gonna build that conviction because it's not easy if you don't give them responsibility and a decision-making point. You have to be able to responsible from what you're building. You have to make the decision. And we are working with KPIs and OKRs. KPIs are like key performance indicators, for example, FX volume for some teams. And we are trying to feed that impact back to the software development. Every time we have planning, we go back and see what was the impact that we delivered to customer, which keeps us very much in loop of what's going on with the business. Also, we constantly work together with experts. For example, we have specific compliance people embedded in my team because we deal a lot with KYC, know your customer. It's like a requirement for many financial domain. And if your team is working on, for example, partner relationships, you might have some people who can help you with the contracts, maybe some legal people. And also, my team is responsible from a big area of small business onboarding. So we work a lot with UX researchers and design and product as well. It's like when we have our stand-ups, UX research is already there because everyone usually have an opinion about UX, but not as constructed as and as data-based as UX research that can add to your team. And the last part that I want to touch in this is listening the customer. Because lucky for us, we have plenty of customers that are willing to give us feedback. And they are calling us every day because they have some problems with our system. So every month or so, we would do this power hour. You would go to a customer support specialist and you would sit with them and you would reply the customer questions. If you are brave, you can take live calls and you are expected to know what your domain is actually showing to customer. What is the customer experience in the product part that you have built? We have customer support specialists embedded in our teams as well. They are very useful to bring the customer voice into product and move the product feature changes to the customer support agents. And it is a company-wide, we have open chat channels. Any customer support person can Slack me, myself or my team quite easily. It is also very encouraged to reach the customer feedback. You can, for example, read through anonymized NPS comments, which is like, why don't I like your product? Why do I like your product? And it is essential to build customer conviction. And what I'm talking about, why this is important for DDD? Because without knowing really your domain, without understanding, without crunching the knowledge, it is really impossible to be able to build a software that is based in the domain itself. So everything we do here is in order to build the understanding of customer value and to be able to gain control of all the necessity tools that you can use to build your software. Second part is implementation. Implementation is, we assume that we go through this process in a cross-functional team. We talk to experts, domain experts. Now, like, you are some kind of domain expert. You can speak domain expert language. And now, like, you are in the phase of writing code. This is probably more relevant for anyone in product development cycles, project managers and developers and product managers. This is the delivery part of the problem. And I'll go through some definitions to be able to go through my example on that. When I say a domain, I haven't defined it, and I have been using it for a long time. It is just a sphere of knowledge, and it is a very abstract definition. For example, for TransferWise, we have our core domain is payment processing, and we have other subdomains in our product. For example, verification is another subdomain, making sure that person is a legal person, making sure that we can onboard that business with reasonable risk. And another subdomain would be support, making sure that customers can call us, making sure that they can help themselves in the product. And we can divide even our core domains into multiple pieces. Pay in, how do you pay in? Multiple, millions of different payment methods that you can use to fund your transfer. Conversion, how do we send money from one place to another and pay out all the different places that you can pay out. But this is not exactly what TransferWise looks like. It's way more complicated than that, but it's a good example around the area. And even subdomains can have smaller domains. For example, self-service would be just like the actions that customer can take in the FAQ URL, whatever, that can help themselves to be able to solve their problem without contacting customer support necessarily. And it would be just a small context in support domain. And when I say domain logic, it is 100% why you are building this code. What is supposed to do? What do you want to achieve? What is the problem that you want to solve? And one of my favorite DDD terms is bounded context. Bounded context, we define it as like an abstract field of information. We say that, okay, this is my set, and inside of this set, I'm going to talk a very consistent language. So in every bounded context, we try to use one term to mean one thing. And we call that language, actually, that common vocabulary, ubiquitous language in DDD terms. But it is universal language of your domain, of your bounded context. And two different, like same term might mean two different things in two different contexts. For example, you might talk about a profile. In verification, it would be like all verifiable data that you submit to our system. And for transfer, it would be just your name. And those objects doesn't really, or those models doesn't need to clash together. For example, verification in verification example, we have to know that ID document is the ID document. Like everyone who says ID document means the ID document, not the address proof. Like to make these definitions inside of your contexts are very important, because without them, it is very hard to understand each other. You speak basically different terms, and you use different terms for representing same contexts. A model, which we use a lot, is the abstraction that you build. So in real life, you might have an object like a person. And a person is an infinitely complex object. I don't know how to model a person that represents it in the real life. But to be honest, I don't really care. I don't really need to model a perfect person. I just need to know its age and name. And that's fine with me. And a user can be very different in many different systems. And it might have some functionalities in some complex systems. I might not have them in most of the systems. But like for me, I would model my user as language and email. That's all my user has. It just like enters its email, we know its language, and that's all. And I would call this abstraction as a model. So I get a real life example, and I simplify it, because I really don't care the weight of that person if I'm only concerned about their name. And the rest of the implementation, I'm going back to this structure because these definitions were a bit off track. And I'll try to give one example, because the other one was a bit more technical, and I'm sure you can find me speaking about the other one somewhere in the web, and it would be way too long if I edit that. We have been working on a feature that we called Multiuser Access for a long time. So in this feature, you can, as a business owner, add some other user to make your accounting. So they can access your profile, they can see your history of transactions, but they cannot really allow to transact for you. So we have been thinking about like, how can we build this feature? So I need to invite someone. I'll probably send them an email invite or whatever, some invite, and they need to accept that invite, and after they accept the invite, they have to go through a flow that they would end up in a state that they're a user now, and they have access to your profile, and they can do your accounting. We started brainstorming about this, like creating mockups. What is it going to look like? What is the functionality of what problem we are solving is the answer that we are trying to find here. And in this stage, event storming might be really beneficial, and there's a session on event storming tomorrow, so if you're interested in DDD, come to that as well. There's a workshop. And we didn't do event storming because we were distributed and we thought it was too much of a hassle. What we did was like, we literally created a Google Docs and drafted our ideas, and people keep changing things until it got stable. And when it got stable, we were like, okay, we have like some bit of understanding. But then we had to like go through some other people in the tribe to make sure that what we are doing is actually compliant and actually like, okay, in the legal wise. What compliance and legal does for us is not like to say, you can't do this, but they say us that you can do this, if you do this, that is the risk. So as a product team, you are also responsible from your own risk. So we talk to legal, we try to understand like what is the implication of the law or regulation so that like we can give our customers a better and safe experience. And then we kept drafting. And in the end, we came to a point that we noticed that we have like some boundaries actually in this problem. Before you come in as an accountant and create an account in TransferWise, we talk about you in like invitee. We say like the notification that we're going to send you. The vocabulary changes drastically when you create your user, because now you're associated to a financial product. Now you are a user. Now we are concerned about your audit log. Now you can access the profile, not the invite. So we defined user creation as going to be one of our key actions. And these two things actually evolve into two different microservices. One of them is invite service, the other one is, I think, something like that, user management service. And I'll go a bit deeper on invite context, because I know many of you here are not developers, but I think this stuff should be easier to understand. That's the whole point of DDD. So in an invite, I would have a notification that I sent to a person. That notification would have an address. Address can be an email address, can be a push notification device ID, can be a link that you can click and get through. You should send the notification. You should make sure that you can save an invite to some place. I don't care if it's a database or text file or you write by hand, but like this is the function that you have to do for this operation. And an invite itself would have like who sent this invite, the actor of the invite, what is the status of this invite, and what is this invite is for, who is this invite is for, and what is the terms of this invite. And validity and created that was the things that we come up. So I can revoke an invite, I can accept an invite, and like a user can reject an invite as well. After we go through these domain objects and domain logic, what next is like trying to build the domain logic in code. So this is how code looks like in probably was how code used to look like, because it probably changed already. And it is quite readable, even though it's like compiling Java code. You can see what it does. It just defines what an invite is literally. What did I do in this graph is the same. And after that, you define the actions that you do. I'll skip this one. You'll define the actions that you do. You define your interfaces, like this code is supposed to do that. And you never really write the implementation of it. But implementation can be live with like developers. You are not really concerned about the technological implementation of a specific functionality. And It is not an easy thing to do. It's probably the hardest part of all this, but it can be abstracted away because it's not a core part of domain logic. So what you end up in the code as well, you would end up with a domain package that would contain all your objects, all your actions, and all your services, and all your events that you sent out. For example, when you send the event out, you might like to keep an audit log of it via another service, so you would send the event somewhere. And these are the implementation parts that you can add. For example, to send notification, I know notification has a method that says send, but I implement it in another layer, so it's a bit clutter-free. Same as the database, and the same as the front end. However, I want to talk to front end, do I even want to talk to front end? And these are like more, let's say, technical implementation concerns. They are not the business concerns immediately. And this is like what the interfaces look like. I can send the notification, and I can find a profile by its ID, and I can save an invite. I find the invite by profile ID. So what we did after this was like come together with my PM back then and go through the classes, like, these are the things that we built. Do you think it makes sense? Do you think we are missing something? Do you think this interfaces is the things that you have been describing to me? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes we lose things even though we try to speak ubiquitous language, because that's how human language works. And this is very clutter-free because like I didn't even have any implementation yet. I didn't even pick a database yet. I don't even know if I'm going to save any data. It's just like pure domain logic, which is exactly the same as the business logic. So in the end, we were all aligned, and the infrastructure, by infrastructure, I mean all the peripherals that is outside, it's easy to swap. For example, I don't want to use MySQL DB, I want to use MongoDB now. Write another adapter, everything should work, because it doesn't really change and affect your domain logic. And there are like some tactical tools that you might want to use, but you don't have to use them. You can start working on the idea and try to make it work for your company, not for all companies. And even though it's a long story to tell, I think all this example that I gave took like 2 days or something, which is very fast for designing 2 microservices in your system. It's for me. But I have some disclaimers. This is a greenfield project, and it wasn't that constrained. I had an example for a bit more constrained project, but I think it's going to be way longer if I go into that. I'll just skip that part. If you want to discuss more about decomposition, I'll be around. We also did something very similar for a huge decomposition project in TransferWise. The thing after you finish building your service or whatever, you have to make sure that you enable the contribution. So any newcomer, any new joiner can maintain your code and make it better. So to be able to do that, especially if you are implementing DDD first time in your company, it is really nice to write an implementation guide that explains what was your thoughts when you did that specific thing. And it is very important to discuss the challenges and benefits and retro through this process openly in the company. One of the things that we did for making sure that we have an implementation guide and making sure that we have a good way to convey the technical decisions that we made was using lightweight architectural decision records. They are very, very, very tiny, like, I don't know, 5-sentence records that you just write through. I did this. This was the context. This is the depth, or this is the design that I'm going for. And you just leave it for the future. You don't have to do it for everything. It's just like for controversial things. If you have probably 100, no one would ever read it. We probably have like 15 or something like that in one of our most complex projects. So yeah, it's just be mindful and write down honestly what you have done and what was the context. I have been through that actually. So, yeah, like I spoke in the beginning of the talk, this is a lot about like autonomy of the teams, decision-making in the teams, the change that is coming from the teams, and teams are very empowered to do this. But not everything fits the original team domain. And teams need to evolve too. Boundaries need to change. And that's not always possible. We put the boundaries because like it's way easier to focus on smaller problems. And like you can know inside out what that thing is doing. As a developer and as a team, as a business process, you would know what it is doing. And that would give you a strong ownership, so you would have a vision on how to move it forward, and you would have a vision on how to extend it, which is very valuable. But the problem is, boundaries is not always very good. Because like, you might think that like, yeah, like that problem sounds big, but like it's not really in my sphere of comfort. So I can easily reject that. I can say that, yeah, I don't want to do that one because like it's not my problem. And it might create, even though you want to solve a problem, you would think that like you shouldn't step into some other people's circle. It might create a barrier to entry for you. And the problem is, like, if we lived in a normal, like, perfect world that is perfectly normalized, and you have, like, perfect teams that you don't have to evolve anything, maybe it would be okay. But, like, never, ever anything fits with the initial design, ever. So you would need to change your domains and change your teams and evolve around how your product evolves. And it is harder to evolve boundaries than the domains because it requires more intense collaboration between teams. So think that you built this like amazing circle and you think that it's really good, you know it inside out, you have a vision for it. And there's like some other project neighboring, but like not really close to your thing. And there are like you just noticed two new features or feature requests come in somehow to your zone. And if you're really lucky, maybe these feature requests are like standalone things that can be deployable. You don't really need to like bind into anything. But might be that they are very coupled. Might be that you might need to combine them together somehow and change it a bit. If you're a bit unlucky, you might need to like extend your domain a bit so that you contain that logic in it as well. And if you are very unlucky, and most of the time, you might need to cut your domain into half, cut the other team's domain into half, and get this new triangle into a more meaningful blob now. This might not be always possible. Maybe it's impractical to do it. If you don't need it, you don't do it. It depends, like any software problem. But it is always good to acknowledge this. It's always good to say, like, with the knowledge that I have today, I would have done this, but it's not practical. Write an ADR, leave a record, and like make other contributors to understand your decisions. To be able to operate on these domains and to be able to ease the cross-domain collaboration, I collected a couple of things that we are doing to align ourselves in the company. One of them is like building collective empathy. If you have people moving around the teams and knowing each other, it helps a lot because like those people know other things and those people also like friends with other people, so they know what they are doing. And working on different projects also help with that so that you understand the struggles of the project. And we have a couple of events that we socialize together. For example, in tech, we have something we call a Swarm Day, that we come together and do a platform improvement. Everyone is working somewhat similar things, depending on the technical track you are in. And in the tribe as well, it is like in my tribe, there are 6 other product teams, and they are working on some different features. So communicating with them and socializing with them helps me a lot to empathize with them. Joining the plannings of each other is another thing that you can do. If you have teams that are working closer to your area, just like go to their planning. We have quarterly planning sessions that are led by teams. So if you just go in and ask them to like, can I just sit there and listen? It would help you to understand those people better. And also, like, if you need some developer-to-developer bonding time, hackathons is a good idea. The second step of this is like building a holistic understanding in the company. So we have cross-cutting guilds, like Android guild, iOS guild, that are working on the vision of Android for the next 5 years or so. So to be able to build this vision is very important because it gives you an understanding of like, what are the steps that I need to go? What are the trade-offs that I need to make? We also do internal tech talks called techs every Friday. You just go there and like, this would be a tech talk, for example, and explain your context and say people like, okay, I'm doing this because of this. This is the thing that I need to build, so that people have a richer knowledge of whole company, how it works. At least they would have a chance to reach that knowledge. Public communication channels is a big plus for me. We talk everything, almost everything in public channels. We have some private channels as well, but they're like, I'm sick, I'm not coming into that kind of things. So we try to discuss all these technical and product things in public channels so that anyone can browse the history and also come in and contribute. We do retros and postmortems that we send out. They are blameless. So even if you caused a huge financial cost or huge damage to a specific customer, you are just supposed to learn from it. You are not really, you won't be punished for it in any means. And good postmortems are always like very much appreciated. So you would get even a good feedback from writing a postmortem. The other thing that I want to talk about is like Tech Day and Mission Days. We have 2 mission days in every year, every 6 months. So we sit together, all company, literally all company, like 1,800 people, comes together, Tallinn, Budapest, whatever location, and then we go through our vision. What did we do in our basic product pillars? What did we change in speed? What did we change in transparency in the last 6 months? And to prepare ourselves and fuel ourselves with the mission and mission statement again. Tech Day is something similar, but it is specifically for engineering and product, and lately more design. So we discuss more about where are we moving in our technological base. What are we doing for scalability, for example? What are we doing to make our tech go to next level? So yeah, this is the summary of everything that I talked. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Helen. So we have time for 3 questions. So who wants to go first here? Do we have enough? Yeah.
So Helin, thank you for this. You said something. You said earlier something about the embedding of UX research in your product engineering. Could you elaborate on that? Sounded very interesting.
Yeah. For example, we have been discussing about that actually yesterday, luckily. We have been thinking about like increasing our conversion in our onboarding funnels because some customers complain that it's a bad experience. So there is plenty of ideas how to do that. But I think what did we come up with was like, okay, everyone has an opinion, let's do a UX research because like we really don't know. We went through with UX research and we have a UX researcher that enables us to do the research. and also does the research herself as well. So we watch the UX testing session with her and like write down our observations and try to group them together so that we can find the pain points in our onboarding flow. So this was one of the examples that we worked with UX research very closely in the recent times.
So it was the product managers and the developers that were observing?
No, we have a UX researcher, like.
But the developers were observing the researcher doing research, basically?
Yeah.
Keeping notes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We also kept notes because like she had a session for us to like introduction to UX research, how you should keep notes, how you should be non-judgmental and stuff. And then like we started keeping notes as well, but like I think her notes were way more qualified than ours.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Helin? We have one over here.
Hi, great talk. So, is one expert per every bounded context or per microservice? How do you do that?
No, it's quite ad hoc. It depends on the team. Usually, like teams feel insecure. Like what happened to us, we were like, we really don't understand the risk, so we definitely need someone understands it because like we are responsible for everything and we don't understand it. So we would get feedbacks when we do plannings, like, do you know the risk of what you're doing? Like, I have no idea. So if you keep getting that feedback, it gives you a good way to like judge yourself that you need one. But there are like compliance leads. They would see like the different risk areas, for example, and they would like advise you to get a person to help you out if you are struggling. So you would get feedback organically, but it's quite ad hoc, so it's not like one person per domain.
Any more questions? We have one at the back. I'm wearing heels. Who's got a mic?
Just a comment. There are already some queues for the lunch. There is food for everyone, but probably for 10 or 5 minutes it's better to answer some questions and share some knowledge than waiting at the queue, okay?
Okay, so I have two questions.
Okay.
First one, I understand that you need somehow to separate business logic from implementation technical details. Because I understand that business logic, that the code is also deals with more complicated business logic. Is there something that you apply in order to achieve that? Some guidelines, some framework, something?
I'm not sure, because like we might have applied something, but for us it was very organic. So we tried to use the principles of DDD, which was coming from like Blue Book of Eric Evans, and some other writings about DDD in the blogs of the internet. So I can't really define what exactly we did and what is the formal process, because it was a bit ad hoc, like everything we do.
Okay, well, can I ask one more?
You can.
Of course.
Okay, thank you. I understand that reporting logic usually can cross-cut more than one subdomains. So how do you use domain-driven design for the reporting part?
Reporting?
Yes.
So it depends. We have like multiple reporting solutions, but what we are doing most of the time is quite async, because like we trigger events every time anything important happens in your domain. So if you create a transfer, if you change something, it would send like, okay, I did this kind of an event emitted from your service. And depending on your reporting needs, you would like pull them together to a report and then like combine it together and serve it. But it depends from report to report most of the time.
Yes, I understand that, but reporting also contains logic, some logic at least.
Yeah, you can.
So the idea is, what domain language do you use for the reporting? a programming that cross-cuts different subdomains where you have probably used different definitions?
Yeah, but like for your reporting, you don't have to use the same definition that I'm using in invite service. What you can do is, let's assume that you have a specific reporting need. Let's assume that you have to report all the account accesses. Let's call it account access reporting service. You would create it, put your logic, grab all the information that you're interested. We agree on an API. You would consume that API, whatever that is, might be a sync, and then do your logic and build your output outside of it.
So you treat it as a different subdomain?
Exactly, because like my domain core right now in this example is not concerned about reporting. But it might be in your case. To be honest, like it's really hard to judge. It depends. It depends.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the questions.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hi, Helin. You mentioned lightweight architectural decision records. Do you find it helps onboarding new members on the teams and revisiting assumptions you made in the past about the products?
It does, actually. It does help a lot. One of the things that help us is like combining it with an implementation guide. Because to be able to understand the ADRs, you need at least to understand like what's going on in the service as a whole. So we have like a small README that is like, I don't know, one Google Docs page long or something like that, that explains like, this is the responsibility of this service, this is what it does, blah, 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 blah. And if you need more details in any specific points, like these are the ADRs, these are the big decisions that we made throughout this. So combination helped us a lot because for one service that I work with, it is contributed a lot by many other teams. Maybe it's anti-pattern, but yeah, it is. And I didn't even onboard those people to those services. They just like read it through. They were like, okay, this is the standard. This is how we extend it. I'll just do my plugin and leave.
More questions? We have time. There's a mic right behind you.
How do you handle communication between teams, duplication of responsibilities of code? How about things that get into two domains or things that don't get in either domain and they're left in the middle? How do you handle this?
It's not a problem that we solve 100%. I think it's probably the hardest part of any software development, like to understand like what is other teams doing and to communicate it through. But the thing that really helps is like, if you have a cluster of teams that are interested in one thing, it's very useful to get them together in a room, in some kind of a neutral ground, saying like, okay, we need to solve this. Like we are working for the same goal, same company, same customers. Like how can we do this? And try to reduce the amount of personal blockers in the path of collaboration. And I think like this, it helps a lot if you know people personally, if you have interacted with them in the somewhat personal level, if they're like more humans than you, than like some people who write things. It's easier to empathize and like try to come up with a solution that is like more practical than emotional.
Great. I was told to stall this crowd, so any more questions?
My days.
Help me out.
Be kind. It's been 45 minutes.
No? Okay then. So we're going off to a lunch break.